Hello, Charlie TCG here, and welcome back to Looking Ahead, the series where I break down and analyse the meta, what's happening over Japan, and how that'll impact Taiwan. City Leagues have returned in Japan, which is a really good insight into exactly how the meta is going to evolve week for week over there in Japan. It's equivalent of their League Cups. Tina is definitely looking like it's still BDIF, but for how much longer? Charizard DX is looking like it potentially could be dethroning it very, very soon. Also got some new cards got revealed. The Elemental Monkeys have returned to the TCG, and they're all right, but they have a really interesting ability. Thank you so much for supporting my channel so far, and let's jump into exactly how the City League is evolving the meta and the new cards. So the Elemental Monkeys here aren't really too much to shout about. The basic Pokemon having Call for Family isn't too bad as well, 70 HP, not terrible because it doesn't rely on having two of them out for Sableye maths, and the attacks are all right. I would say Pampor is probably the best, 30 damage, and the opponent's active Pokemon is asleep. Not terrible, but the Simisage, Simisear, and Simipour are very interesting. If all three of them are in play, ignore all the colorless attack costs in all of their attacks. So this could be used in the likes of a Luminous Energy sort of box, or having a grass, fire and water energies around there, which could potentially be okay. Simisage is a really interesting attack, which has 100 damage, and it's not affected by any damage from your opponent's Pokemon that have any abilities on them, except Simisage. This isn't terrible if you think about how many of the format have abilities, which could see some play, but 100 damage, you're basically three-shotting some Pokemon. Simisear is all right doing 190 and then 30 damage to itself, really good sort of effect that way. And then Simipour does 50 damage and 30 damage to each of your opponent's Pokemon at bench Pokemon. Now, this isn't terrible, but when you think of the likes of Sableye and Greninja dominating the format, you need to put out a Jirachi and a Manaphy to really protect your bench space. When you think of it that way, you've got one spare shot slot for one of the basic Pokemon which you worry of going to attack with and potentially be knocked out. This can be really, really devastating in that style of matchup there. I think it's a really unique tool sort of effect. I think the attacks are very, very powerful. You could even use in the likes of Luminous Reversal NG if you're below. Unfortunately, that can't work for the same as Simisear, but potentially that could be a factor around it as well. Really interesting sort of effects as well with the attacks. Potentially could see some play, but definitely more of a rogue deck or a bad deck Monday sort of situation. But anyway, let's jump into exactly the City League results. So this is looking at the top 16 from Poker AC book, which is definitely the most reliable source which I use because they constantly give out the entire breakdown of what is happening over there in the City Leagues. And we can see here that Charizard and Tina are neck and neck, being 16.7% of the field of the top 16 in all of the City Leagues that did happen over the weekend. Very, very exciting to see here. Gardevoir and Sheehan Power definitely up there in that position of well, by being about 13.5 and 13%. So that's about nearly 60% of the meta of those four archetypes. Now, Charizard is definitely one of the newer decks people want to try out, and honestly having a lot of success, getting a top 8 placement over in the Yokohama Championship, and then for us as well in our regionals and special events, doing incredibly well by actually winning some events, getting some top 4 and top 8 placements as well. This is very, very exciting to see how Charizard is evolving. There's so many different ways to play it. The Lost Box version, the Arvin build, the Arceus build, the just regular Pidgeot build. It's so exciting to see how this deck is slowly evolving and becoming actually meta relevant. Tina is definitely one of those decks which is always going to be up there in the top position. Has an incredible attack, has an incredible versatile attackers as well, with the likes of Sableye, Cramorant, and Greninja. And honestly, it's just incredibly well and really utilizes Path to Peak as strong. Gardevoir and Sheehan Power also do incredibly well because, as you can notice in these sort of archetypes here, not many of these decks are focusing around Path to the Peak. Yes, Giratina does play like one, potentially now to 2 to 3 copies of it, purely because they want to add a Jirachi to really help them in the Sableye maps as well. But as Path to Peak is less rampant, the decks like Sheehan Power, Gardevoir, and even likes of Mew and Miraidon, even despite Palkia and Charizard, they can do incredibly well in a format where people aren't relying too much on Path to Peak to really slow down the other decks. Mew being nearly 10% is very, very good, but you might see in a minute, it was very representative in the top 16, but in the actual finishing results, Mew definitely didn't really do that far. Colorless Lugia is definitely the right way to play Lugia right now. Single Strike, I've a couple which got into top 8, maybe a few into top 16, but definitely the colorless build is the strongest build. Definitely one that after getting second place in Yokohama Championships, as well as also top 8, colorless Lugia is definitely the most dominant force. Palkia is definitely another really interesting one as well, by being 2.6%. But definitely some deck which is constantly going to be evolving back and forth. When you look at this, there is one strong archetype in our format which is completely missing here, Lost Box. Now, people are definitely really scared about Sableye playing it constantly because of Jirachi. It's definitely a lot more rampant than it has been. It's the second weekend of it being legal, and it is in a lot of decks. Even like some their own Lost Box of archetypes as well, to really slow down your opponent in that sort of way here. So that's the reason why it's fallen into that 15.6% other. It did do okay, it did get a second place, did get some top 8s here and there, but not enough to really get the warranted finish that it really did deserve. If we just look at that breakdown and put it into a tier list, which is what Poker AC did, we can see here that their tier 1, their S tier, is definitely Charizard and Lost Tina. Their tier 2 is Gardevoir and Xianpao. And their tier 3 is Mew VMAX, Lugia, Miraidon, and Palkia. This is definitely a bit of an interesting take to how their format is evolving over there. I potentially would replace that Palkia with the likes of maybe even that Lost box, or more importantly, the Rapid Strike box, which is definitely doing very, very well because Rapid Strike has an incredible matchup into Charizard because it has such high HP that Charizard really can't get their attack on that space right now. I generally think that I would say Rapid Strike would probably be a tier 3 deck as well. Apart from that, I would not disagree with this format at all. Definitely a really good snapshot to see exactly how the format is evolving over in Japan. And we look at the winning sort of breakdown, exactly how our decks have won. We can see here that Lost Tina is definitely up there at the #1 spot with 4 wins, no top 2s, no seconds, but 3 top 4s and 11 top 8s and countless top 16s. So it's a very, very powerful archetype. But like I mentioned, Rapid Strike box actually did pretty well. The only other deck except Giratina to get more than 1 win over this weekend, getting 2 wins and a top 8. Like I mentioned, it has a very good Charizard matchup, really utilizing like of Yoga Loop, as long as they don't have any Jirachi Sama, but their bench is going to be really full anyway, so potentially not. You can really play around that, get rid of their Manaphy, use the Urshifu next sort of turn afterwards to get additional 2 to maybe 3 prizes. They have so high HP that Charizard, you have to take 5 prizes for Charizard can even one-hit KO you. You can instantly do lots of healing with likes of Cheryl. So it's a really good way of how the deck is truly evolving and truly is one of Charizard's worst matchups, and it took full advantage of it over this weekend. Charizard as well did incredibly well with a win, 4 second places, 8 top 4s, and 5 top 8s. Xianpao's up by #4 with 1 win, 4 top 2, 3 top 4s, and 7 top 8s. Gardevoir is 1 win, 1 second place, 4 top 4s, 9 top 8s, and Colorless Lugia has got a win, 2 top 4s, and 2 top 8s. It's really interesting to see how the meta is evolving. Yes, the format is still in that early stages, and same thing with City League, so only happening on Saturday and Sunday, and it's going to be a lot more as the weeks go on, which is very exciting to see that just with a small amount, the format has kind of like shown itself exactly what players are leaning towards. Still going with that Lost Tina scene, that is the way I want to play Lost Box, because I don't rely too much on Sableye, which is where more Lost Box is really evolving with it. Xianpao definitely is absolutely adored over there in Japan. A lot of people are teaming up with the likes of Palkia. It's not just a Palkia plus Xianpao, it's Xianpao and Palkia together. It's either a 3 Xianpao and a 3-3 line of Palkia, or 3 Xianpao and 2-2 line of Palkia. And there's not really too much of a split that way. I generally think that is the way how you play Xianpao. Gardevoir is definitely adding that new stadium, that Moonlight Stadium, which gets you heal 30 damage, which means you can attack with your basic, not your basic, but your stage 2 Shine Arcana Gardevoir. And Colorless Lugia is just incredibly strong and really, really powerful. So this is really exciting to see exactly how the meta is evolving. So let's look at exactly some of these winning lists. So this is the Charizard list that did end up winning here, and it's very simple to where you have seen most of them before. It is still the pitch up build, it is still the Arvin build, which is definitely the more popularized version after the SP over there in South America, but they have included a Manaphy as well as a Jirachi, really respecting the fact that Sableye is definitely one of their worst matchups as well. Still going at 70 HP Charmander, but a lot of debate here. Why would you go 70 HP Charmander when you can have the 50 HP Pidgey as well? Kind of like counteracts it where they can both KO both of them, but they're going to be focusing more on KOing with the Stabilized, KOing the Pidgeys instead of focusing on the Charmanders. I think this is definitely a much more stronger pick of Charizard, the build, how this works here. I love the Entei as well, by having that 230 HP. It's very difficult for some decks to really deal with very much in the early game. It can really help capitalize, because Entei can do that 220. Imagine how much KOs nearly everything. That's why I love it, having that 230 HP. Rest of the deck is very, very simple to where we've kind of seen in most decks as well. Lost City, I really like in this sort of deck here. I like the choice part as well to really help in those matchups. Like I mentioned before, the Rapid Strike is pretty, really bad. So this choice part really helps in that matchup as well. Rest of the deck, very simple to where we're kind of seeing this Charizard deck winning, but another version of which to get second place is this Lost Box build. Doesn't, in fact, you may notice here, does not play Sableye. So they were really, really scared of Sableye completely, using Cramorant as a secondary attacker. So that's really interesting that it's focusing primarily on just having that Charizard, getting it powered up and having a Lost Zone engine as the draw factor of the deck, and not relying on likes of Pidgeot as well as Arceus, and still having the respect of that Jirachi in there to really help you in that Sableye matchup. Rest of the deck, very, very simple. I like the Vitality Band and the Defiance Band as well. Defiance Band can really help in the late game or potentially the early game, as your Crown Rank can do 140 damage, which KOs a Gardevoir at full health, which is definitely something to really consider about. And the Vitality Band can really help you after that the opponent takes one prize card. You can do that 220 damage, KOing the likes of Miraidons, and more importantly, Shein Powers, which are absolutely running rampant over there in Japan. Lost Tina, this is the really interesting list, which actually won. One of the lists that did one. It still plays the Sableye, but also plays one Manaphy and one Jirachi. Really helpful in the mirror match as well, by really denying your opponent's Sableyes, or even like if you're against Gardevoir decks, denying their Cresselias, denying their Yoga Loop in Rapid Strike box. I really like how this Jirachi really fits really well into this deck here. You may see some of it did in fact take away from the likes of Path to Peak by only playing 2 copies of it and 1 copy of Pokegear as well. I love Pokegear in Lost Tina. I think it really helps you dig for that turn 1 chorus if you're going second, or even if on your second turn of the game, you want to get to that Magic 7 as quick as possible. And that Pokegear really helps in that matchup. 2 Roxanne, we're used to seeing maybe 2 Roxanne and 1 Iona, or 1 of each. So 2 Roxanne, I don't really hate in this deck. And I really like Heavy Ball as well as an inclusion in this one here. Really focusing on that. I want to get that Jirachi out. I don't want you to hit a turn 2 Sableye potentially. So I really like how this deck works. Potentially this could be a way how we're seeing Lost Tina. This is definitely a deck which I really want to try out once we get a full list for our Paradox Rift. Gardevoir, this is pretty much, I would say, what the Gardevoir is going to look like in the next couple of sets coming forward. We do play that new Moonlight Stadium, which gets you heal 3 damage counters from all of your Pokemon by discarding a Psychic Energy. This means that your likes of your Zacians, your likes of your China kind of Gardevoirs, they can deal huge amount of damage as well, which is definitely one thing which I absolutely love about it. The 1 Artisan and 1 Collapse Stadium works incredibly well. The Collapse to get rid of a really heavily damaged Pokemon that might go around there, and the Artisan to really help you get those basic Pokemon you might need to have. Potentially the Mew, the Manaphy, the Jirachi, which is definitely key in this deck, or the Rolts as well. I like having the research as well. People may play Worker, which I may potentially, I'm still huge a Worker fan, so I might potentially add Worker into it. But having that research is really good in the early game, or potentially late when we have to do that late game digging. No sort of Lost Vacuum, no Worker there, but you play 4 copies of Stadium cards, you have that easy out to go around or Path to the Peak by constantly huge amount of draw factors like of Curlier. Definitely a really interesting version of how Gardevoir is slowly evolving to it. The 11 basic and 2 reversal. It's kind of become the norm over there in Japan, but I potentially am still always a 10-2 split. But again, they have a much more different format as well. And having that new Stadium card, you really need as many basic Psychic Energies in your hand as much as possible. Very interesting deck here is the Shein Power Palkia Pidgeot. Yes, you heard that right. There is a huge combination of different archetypes as well here. I think the Pidgeot is definitely really good, and Shein Power is really capitalizing the fact that there aren't that many Path to the Peaks running through there. So that's why you can play so many abilities like Shein Power, like Palkia, and of course like Pidgeot and Luminion and Radiant Greninja. There is so many abilities focused on Roblox Pokemon. It could potentially be exactly the way how you play this deck forward. I think this is really interesting. This is the only winning list here. There are a couple of Shein Powers that are a really interesting stat. The most popular way to play Shein Power right now in Japan is in fact the Turbo build, but followed very closely by Palkia, and the rest of it is the Arceus build. So definitely very interesting in that one. This very much reminds me of the older format Shein Power decks by focusing purely a lot more on the supporter build and the Lost City and the Avery. The Lost City, I think, is quite interesting in that way. It does help you get rid of that Manaphy, really helps you in that Gardevoir matchup by using their Greninja, canceling Clone, and then Lost City potentially 2 Curliers, or more importantly, a Gardevoir and a Curlier. So that's an interesting way of how you play it as well. But only playing 3 rare candies in a 3-2 Excalibur and a 1-1 Pidgeot is definitely potentially a bit of a niche sort of way in that way, but does play an energy search, which is quite an interesting way to definitely get your energies from your deck. I think it's very interesting archetype. I don't know if this might be the best way to play Shein Power, but it's really nice to see that Shein Power is still getting a bit of niche of life. But as you notice again, there is 1 copy of Jirachi. Colorless Lugia is by far the best way to play Lugia right now, and this build is very similar of the list that actually ended up coming second, and also the list that did get top 8. Does have the Tool Jammer, which is quite interesting in a way, really stopping the likes of these choice belts kind of going around there, or more importantly, like the likes of Box of Disaster and Panic Master, potentially like that. Is really good to include that in there. I like the Mew EX in there. It just makes Colorless Lugia so much stronger in a way here. Doesn't play the Weird Ear, which I'm a huge fan of Weird Ear, especially in the deck, because having that Weird Ear gets it another capability to get this big 1-hit KO potential, which this deck is definitely absolutely lacking. But some really good two-shotting archetypes, the likes of Snorlaxes, and obviously the likes of that Luxray, which should instantly play down as soon as your opponent takes one prize card, attach Reversal Energy, and you've got an attacker which can potentially KO a Pidgeot EX, which is definitely something really, really strong. Just play 2 copies of Great Ball as well as Evolution Incense. 2 copies of I don't mind the likes of Great Ball. Obviously, you potentially could get any of your Archeopses you might potentially need, so it's definitely a good inclusion as well. But also playing the copy of Zinnia's Resolve as well as even an Arven as well. Sorry, Avery, which is definitely something which is very interesting as well in the style deck here. Avery could definitely really help in those matchups, which potentially like Lost Box or even Gardevoir, when they have a high bench count. If you instantly get rid of some potential of their setup, it can really, really slow them down and can propel Colourless Lugia to be on top. Miraidon as well, Dane's quite a few new cards here, but this one here focused purely on Toolbox, and it's really interesting that this was the Miraidon that actually won. Does play that new Tapu Koko EX, which I love, which has 30 damage plus an additional 70, or is it 90? I can never remember which one, but your opponent's active Pokemon is instantly KO'd if one of your Pokemon was knocked out next turn. That's not terrible as well, but what's interesting here is it plays a 1/1 copy of Regieleki VMAX. Yes, you heard that right. Regieleki VMAX in here for your basic lightning Pokemon to do 30 more damage. Now, this can be pretty good as well, especially in the Charizard matchup, where the likes of your Raichu doesn't need to take discard an additional lightning energy, which again, in turn, helps you in the likes of your Gardevoir and also your Mew matchup as well. So that's definitely a good reason why you play it. It also helps you like to Raikou and Miraidon. You do get the one-hit KO with Miraidon on a Raikou V, which has a Bravery Charm on it, also getting a KO on Tyranitar as well, and also Entei V as well. So there are some inclusion of this one, but I think it's very niche sort of way around it. You do sacrifice a little bit of your consistency, but you can see here they still find a way to play a lot more switching cards in this deck as well. There's only 1 copy of Path to the Peak. Like I mentioned, you want to focus more on your abilities in here. Still has room to find the Zapdos and the Hawlucha and the Mew EX. So yeah, there is a lot going on with this deck here. I'm not sure exactly how competitive this deck version really is, but it might see a way of how Miraidon is kind of evolving over this one. I generally would cut the Regieleki VMAXs and focus more on having a Tapu Koko in this list, maybe even get rid of the Zapdos as well, which I really like the Zapdos in the deck here, but it's very situational at times. But definitely the Mew EX and Tapu Koko EX are a really good inclusion for Miraidon. Other sort of decks as well, I talk about Rapid Strike Box. It hasn't really gained anything since Iona, I really feel like it. So both winning lists are pretty much identical. Doesn't even add the likes of Giratina in this one, but definitely it's very, very powerful. Having a huge amount of HP is really difficult for decks to deal with as well. The thing about the likes of Gardevoir, they have to burn so many resources and attack with 2 prizes to kind of KO one of you guys as well, and then you can instantly potentially KO them back with a Yoga Loop, gain additional cards, additional turn, which is very, very powerful. And also it helps you in your Charizard match by having a huge amount of HP, dealing with the Pokemon that have on the bench. So there's definitely some ways around it. So I really am invested to see exactly how Rapid Strike Box will evolve as well, by any of the new cards I might gain at the end of the month when we get Paradox Rift. So definitely I just want to touch upon it as well. Another deck I really want to talk about is United Wings. It did actually get a couple top 8 placements, and I generally think, as I mentioned last week, I think it's definitely got a place right now in the format because of Jirachi has kind of saved this archetype from kind of like being absolutely losing so hardly to the likes of Sableye by constantly you're not having any of your Pokemon set up because they can constantly be lost mind away. So I generally think this Jirachi can really help in that sort of matchup as well. I think having that Galate to get that buddy search to get any of your supporters is very, very strong. The rest of the foot card really doesn't make that much constantly working incredibly strong. I really like the Echoing Horn in this way to constantly reutilize and the likes of Luminion or Squawkabilly or any low HP V or EX Pokemon constantly be gaining as well because they play high counts of boss's orders. It's very interesting to see that United Wings has actually found a new lease of life and potentially could stay up there as being one of the top dogs. So finishing off, looking ahead, is Zard and Tina right now the new BDIFs in the format? I generally think they potentially could be that one. If Charizard constantly propels itself to being constantly evolving and really focusing a lot more on our results as well, to how Japan is really focusing their Charizard EX builds, I generally think Charizard could dethrone Lost Zone Tina, but generally I'm unsure about this. It's always going to be exciting that every single week we get to really diverge and talk about how the meta is evolving. Could Lost Box actually return? Could Sableye rear its ugly head again? Or is Jirachi generally that powerful? It's really gatekeeping now Sableye from progressing. We know that's not really the case, as Lost Tina is still pretty much one of the top decks, which still plays 1 to 2 copies of Sableye. So, but will a pure Sableye focused deck with the likes of other ranged attackers could really see a return? And any of the new decks making an impact. We saw a couple Goldeen goes and even a Garchomp make actually top 8, but not really progressing that further. I really hope we see these new decks kind of progress in the format. We really like them. A lot of people are talking about them, Goldingo and Garchomp, but they're not making the impact that we really thought about. Or are we needing to wait until Paradox Rift drops with some more better cards really help these archetypes forward? So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'm really happy that City Leagues have returned. And again, I'm going to talk about it every single week, talk about how the meta is evolving in Japan. I'm really excited to share that with you guys. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to like, subscribe, and comment down below. What deck are you the most excited about to see the return of, or how the meta is going to evolve? For me, I'm really intrigued to see how Charizard is going to constantly be changing. But as you know, Chi and Power definitely being a tier 2 deck over there. I'm really, really happy and excited to see how it's going to evolve over time. So I will see you guys in a few days' time for another video. Bye for now.